Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Can you force love? What if you don't feel like it? Can you make it happen? It's a feeling, and how could you force a feeling if you don't have it? Today's mimer begins with Torah Toldos Yitzchak, which is the beginning of our parsha. The Torah is telling us who are the children of Yitzchak and Rivka, which of course are the two twins, Yaakov and Esav. The Alter Rebbe tells us, Torah Toldos Yitzchak, the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, King Solomon says, "Smoilei tachas l'reishi v'yiminei tchabkeni." His left is under my arm, is under my head, and his right is embracing me, which is the left hand under the head, and the right is embracing me. What does left represent Kabbalistically? What does it mean on a deeper level? It's a metaphor as well, which left represents Yitzchak. Yitzchak in general is the approach mimato l'maylo. We have a two-directional relationship with Hashem. We have where God is coming to us or giving us energies and bestowing blessings upon us and strength, and that's from above to below. And then we have the upward part of the relationship, and that is from below to above. So Yitzchak represents the person who is from below to above. The Yeminai and the right side, as opposed to the left, that represents Avraham. That's the level of Avram, who his focus and his way of serving Hashem was milmayla lemata, from above to below. Where do you see this in their life? Where do you see this in their personality? That Avram was downward facing and Yitzchak was upward facing. And the answer is, if you look at the personality of Avraham Avinu, what we know about him, his midah, his characteristic was hachnasas erchem. He was very hospitable. He had a lot of guests. He was a person that always had an open home, and him together with Sarah were very kind, hospitable, and giving people. Yitzchak, on the other hand, if you look at his life, what was his focus? He was a digger of wells. Now, digging of wells represents not giving to somebody else as the focus. In other words, you don't have water, let's bring you water. That would be Avram's way. Yitzchak's way is, let's dig in the ground, let's bring out water. Let's go from below to above and make it happen within ourselves. And that's left, because left represents severity, it's discipline, it's digging deeper. Now, to understand this concept, right versus left, giving versus digging deeper, or above to below versus below to above, like Yitzchak, we need to understand what we say in Shema every day, ve'ahavta, and you should love Hashem. How can you tell a person, seemingly, if you think about it, it's not possible to command a person to love. If you love, then you love. If you don't feel that affection, that care, that interest, how could you tell a person that you must love? You could tell a person you have to put on film even if you don't feel like it. You could tell a person that you must give charity even if you don't feel like it. But you can't tell a person you must have a feeling, but what if I don't? And the answer is that Torah does tell us to love Hashem. And the way that it happens is, what is before V'ahavta? It says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Ksiv Havaya Echad, God is one. When we say the Shema, put our hand over our eyes, we say the Shema, which concludes with Hashem Echad, what's really going on? It's not just the words that we're saying, but when a person contemplates, he reflects on the idea, Inyan Echad, the concept of one. What does it mean God's one? It doesn't just mean, hey, he's one. Rather, that there's nothing else in the world, including, by the way, spiritual beings. When you talk about angels or in the flow of divine energy and different worlds, there are some very, very spiritually powerful places. And all of those realms and all of those levels and all of those stages are nothing compared to God. It's not like, that's very powerful and God's more powerful. They have no relation at all when it comes to God. So a person starts to think, doesn't just say the words, but he reflects on it. He contemplates. The difference between Jewish meditation and the meditation term that's used loosely in other places is that normally we say meditation, we mean empty your mind from anything else, right? Empty it, and there should be nothing else in your mind. In Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, and specifically in Chassidus, when we talk about hisboinunus, contemplation or reflection, what we mean is zero in and focus on an idea really, really well. It's not about emptying it out. It's about connecting with it to an extent that it causes a feeling within you. So when a person thinks about the fact that there's nothing else in the world, physical or spiritual, which comes even close, which has even a relatable connection to Hashem. I shouldn't say connection, but it doesn't come to Hashem. We all have a connection to Hashem. When we say Havaya Elokeinu, God's our God and the God of our fathers. Shehu b'chinas tzimtzum, because when we talk about the method of how godliness comes into this world, it goes through a contraction level where it's funneled, at least to our perspective, or only to our perspective. It seems like it's less of a flow, meaning in order that you should have from the God essence of Hashem come down on a level which is known as the wisdom and the intellect or the knowledge, and as it gets to the lower levels, they're incomparable to God's essence. Antu Chag, you're one, but you're not one of the count, because it's not that there's five and you're saying here's one and then there's two. When we say one, it really means the only one. Therefore, first you have to have the level of Elokeinu, which means tzimtzum, where Hashem contracted himself, made it seem to us that it's contracted because we can't relate to that essence of Hashem or have it manifest itself because it's so potent. And then you have the Vav of Elokei, which is the Hamshacha, the flow. I'll explain in a minute. That it should come about the level of Aviseinu, which is tzimtzum. Okay, so what he's saying is like this. You start off Elokeinu, Elokei Aviseinu, which means you have the level of tzimtzum, where Hashem is contracting, so to speak, his essence or the intensity of the divine flow. And then you have the Vav of Elokeinu, which is Vav. If you look at the way that a Vav is made, it starts off as a Yud, and then it flows downward. That's the Vav. So it represents the flow of energy coming down. Or in the words of Chassidus, it's called Hamshacha. Now, when a person starts to realize that the spiritual levels that we learn about or know about and so on, they are completely removed. In other words, it's only through a result of a contraction system it comes down. When a person thinks about that, he realizes how great Hashem is, and all he wants is to connect to Hashem and not to go into a dark place. In other words, the more you think, reflect, contemplate on the greatness of Hashem, the more you develop a feeling for it. Think about it in terms of a relationship with another person. When you realize how beneficial that person is to you, or you realize on a deeper level how great that person is, it causes you to have feelings towards them. So what we're saying is, reflect on the greatness of Hashem, specifically about the idea that everything that happens afterwards is a flow from Hashem, but doesn't come close to what his essence is. And you realize his greatness. So that's really the process of davening. It's not just the contemplation of the word Echad in Shema, but it's leading up to that throughout the Sukkah de Zimra, from the whole first part of the morning prayer of Shachris, is giving us the ability to think. And we some of the things that we say are from Tehillim, from Psalms of King David, or praising Hashem, the greatness of Hashem, and then you get onto angels, and the blessings of Shema. We're talking about some of the high spiritual beings. You think about it, and you talk about it in the davening and so on, and in the Hasidic davening, you sing about it and so on. It leads you to have a feeling towards Hashem. And now, I'm not just commanding you, hey, have a feeling. I'm commanding you to reflect on ideas that will lead you to have that feeling. So can you tell someone that they have to love? Yes. What you're telling them is do the necessary steps to love. I'll mention that sometimes when it comes to relationships, a person is told, let's say it's a spouse, is told, or one of the methods that's very common is write down all the qualities that your spouse has. What are you grateful for? Because it develops feelings. It helps the person come to a realization of how lucky they truly are. And it's not just spouses, it's in general. A person has a difficulty connecting in some relationship. Take a moment and write down those things. And tell yourself, hey, I'm not going to take this for granted or that for granted. But in our context, it's about our relationship with Hashem. And, however, Amnam, this is all in a format of ratzui, that a person has this yearning, a desire. What happens after thinking about the greatness of Hashem, and contemplating on it, and so on and so forth? A person now has this strong desire to connect. And he wants to get closer to Hashem. But all this is only in a way of ratzui, where you're running towards. But that's not enough. You can't just have a yearning, I want to connect to Hashem. That's not going to do it. You need to have also a settling, which at Hasidus is called a shuv, where a person is settling back in, like the greatness of the light from the darkness. Sometimes when you have a dark situation, a challenging reality, the person gets out of it and they get a certain light. That light that results from that is a greater light than just plain light. Light, which is a result of darkness, is always much greater. Let's say a person, God forbid, had a health scare. And it turns out that, thank God they got out of it and everything is fine. But somehow they're working on themselves and they're much more focused on their health and they're doing much better. And now they're even greater than they were before, if not for that setback. Okay? Because the darkness, when you have good that comes out of dark, when you have light that comes out of dark, it is a much greater light than when it's on its own. So what this does is it causes that when a person has that desire, it's not enough to have the desire, but it has to settle, has to return, has to actually play itself out into making a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. Therefore, the commandment to love is from the opposite, from above to below. Which means, what do you say? Hashem, just tell us, the name of Hashem should be loved through you. It's not that Hashem is loving you. Of course he is. But cause that Hashem's name should be loved through you. Which means, you're doing something, you're causing there's a love to Hashem. There's another way that Hashem just makes it happen. Right? But it's much better when it takes effort. Because it's light that comes from darkness. You're not in the mood. You're not interested. You work on yourself. You make it happen. It's not so simple. You weren't, in the mood. Do something on your own to bring it forth from above. Okay, now let's talk about Avram's lifestyle. This is what Avram's behavior was. Avram Avinu was very hospitable. He gave Arabs food, right? He gave them a lot of food. They were in the desert. They were stuck. They were traveling. There's no place to get food. And all of a sudden, you have Avram's tent, which is extremely hospitable. But after they ate, he told them, I want you to know, who should you thank? Who do you bless? Don't bless me for the food. You have to bless Hashem. Why did he do that? In order that there should be a revelation of godliness down here in this world. That also the Arabs should recognize the greatness of Hashem. What's he doing? He's giving them food. And then he's telling them, I want you to recognize the love that we have for Hashem. However, it's done in a way from above to below, because he's giving them something. So what's Avram doing? Avram comes along and he says, guys, here's food. And they're smacking their lips and so thankful and grateful. And he says, my friend, it's not me, it's Hashem. So they received something from above, which is causing them to to recognize Hashem, to appreciate him, etc., etc. The Yitzchak, however, his Avram's son, was very different. He was chayfer be'erais. He was digging wells, as we said. What's the idea of digging wells? That is revealing from below to above. Water from a well goes upward, right? So you have water on the bottom, now it's going up. It's not that Avram comes and gives the person something. Yitzchak is bringing from within the person up. Now, what's greater, giving down or bringing out from within? Like the mushal of a well or a pit. The water is there in a concealed way. And through the digging, the water gets revealed. Okay, so Yitzchak, as opposed to Avram, was a well digger, and he was bringing out from within the person, from within the dryness, from within the problem, was bringing out the solution, which is greater, as we said, than if you just get it from above; it's just given to you. Now, the reality is that Avraham Avinu was also digging wells, as we know. It's not just Yitzchak was digging wells. Avraham Avinu was also digging wells. Aval Ksiv Vayisptimum Plishtim. The Philistines, the Plishtim, they stuffed his wells, right? So he dug, but it didn't endure. His wells were temporary. The Yitzchak Chafaresan, Yitzchak, he dug them. The Karalem Shemais, he called the names of these new wells. They're not new. They're Avram's wells that were closed up. But he dug them and was able to get them back out, to get the water to go again. He named them the same names that his father was named the wells originally. So Yitzchak named the wells the same names that Avram gave them. Now, when Torah says Yitzchak gave them the names like his father's names, there's two spellings of Shemais. There's Shemais, Shin Mem Vav Saf, which would be the full way of writing names in plural. And then there is names, just Shemais without the Vav. And when it talks about Yitzchak's names, it says with a Vav. When it talks about Avram's names, it says without a Vav. What's the difference? We mentioned earlier, about, 7 minutes ago, or 9 minutes ago, the idea of the Vav is a flow. Avram's way, when you just give, it causes a flow to happen from above to below, but it's a disturbed flow. It stops. It's not consistent. It gets stuck somewhere. There's a blockage. And that's why when it talks about the names he gave, which represent the wells that he dug, there is no Vav, because it wasn't consistent. The Plishtim stuffed them up. It didn't endure. Yitzchak, on the other hand, has wells. And when we talk about the names that he gave, Torah says, with a Vav, because they were never stuffed afterwards. You know why? Because he represented digging. He represented from within yourself, not just making it happen outside of you, but doing it from within you. That was Yitzchak's greatness, as opposed to Avram's. Now, we're going to talk about Yitzchak's greatness, just to clarify that Avram, of course, was very great, but for his stage and where he comes in the order of our ancestors, first you have to have the pioneer. You have to have Avram, who's going out there and calling out and telling everyone there's one Hashem. And then you could have the Yitzchak level, or you have to have the Yitzchak level, which causes it to endure. Let's do it inside in the Hebrew. Because after Yitzchak was digging, and Yitzchak represents again digging from within, from below to above, not just on your own, and not just automatic, but on your own and putting in effort. Their flow never stopped. And they flow and they come forth. Hashisha mides, the 6 mides, which that's what the Vav represents, the 6 emotions, which in Chassidus we talk about. You have intellectual capabilities, but the point of it is that from there should come down into emotional feelings and then to action. We said Chachma and Bina should lead down into that. But so Yitzchak's way causes there should be the Vav should flow, which is Shemetz Moli Bevav. But Avraham Avinu, it doesn't have the Vav when it talks about his names. Vishasatam Plishtim, because the Plishtim stuffed them. And therefore, the chitzonim, the external forces, which means impurities, they have some ability to impact them. That's why the Plishtim were able to come, and they were able to stuff them up successfully. And therefore, through the Chfir of Yitzchak, you have Shemetz with a Vav. Now, Sheikh will come, it says, Ki ata avinu, you're our father. What does it mean that you're our father? Yitzchak specifically. We have 3 ancestors, right? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why is Yitzchak the one that's called Avinu? Because Yitzchak's name, which represents Good Morning Dove. Thanks for joining. Because the main laughter, the simcha and the joy, which will be, meaning the main satisfaction, comes from the level of Yitzchak. Why? Because what's greater? when it's given to you from above or when you put in your own effort. And of course, as we said, the answer is when you put in your own effort, then it endures. And that's when Mashiach will come. We're going to recognize that the greatness is going to be, it was harder work, but the greatness will be Yitzchak. And therefore we say about Yitzchak Yata Avinu, Shemimata L'mayla, Asher B'china Zu, and Kates B'tachlis. When it goes from below to above, the self-made, so to speak, not self, like God didn't help you, but your own efforts is always more enduring. In this context, it has no end. Shenkin Avram, but when you talk about Avram, who he is from above to below, Yesh Lagvul, it has a limit. It comes down. And therefore, by Avram, it says 2 times when Hashem calls out to him, it says Avram, Avram, because it's the Hamshacha, it's the flow. Number 1, it should come about and have the Atzilus level, the high spiritual world. Within that, it should have Chachma and Bina, wisdom and knowledge, which represents which leads to the Tzimtzum, which causes a contraction and a little bit of the right amount of godliness should flow down. And the second one is now we want to have another push to bring it into the lower worlds, but it only stays, so to speak, above. But when it comes to Yitzchak doesn't need that extra second level because it doesn't stop. Avram needed it 2 times Avram because it could get stuck because it doesn't have its own effort, so to speak. Yitzchak is a matal l'mayla, from below to above. There's no end. And everyone exalts you. Sela means forever. Again, it endures. And from this type of service of Hashem is have ikarat tzchok, brought about the main laughter. We learned because we learned that mishmaya meyav yavi mishkal leshakli. We learned that from heaven they give but they don't take. Meyav u'bechinas ishtashlos me'ayin leyesh, which means in general there's a story about the Chanina ben Daisa, who was miraculously given a leg. Without getting into the whole story now because we're out of time, but miraculously given a golden leg to his table, which would take care of all his poverty. But then he realized that it's going to cause him to lack somewhere else, and he didn't want it. And heaven took back that golden leg. And the Gemara says that it's a greater miracle that they took it away, because from heaven they give it, they don't take. Which is so generally speaking, from heaven they made from ayin to yesh, from nothing into something, which means spirituality turned into something physical. That was Avram's way. But the person has to put in his effort and transform from this something into nothing, which means take the spirituality which turned into physicality and turn it back into spirituality, elevate it. And this way it'll endure because you transformed it, you put in your effort. Which is the idea of Yitzchak, which is laughter and great pleasure. And we'll stop here. The next part of this mimer talks about the idea of opposites attracting, and this idea of how Avram and Yitzchak, how it intersyncs, if that's a word, with each other. And God willing, we will continue this mimer. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining. Do me a favor, share, like, subscribe. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to address them live or in the comments. Have a great day.